Everybody for joining us. My name is John Allen. I'm joined by Shane Murphy in a remote location. He's up in the Big Smoke for today. And I have Dave O'Sullivan here beside me and Conor Murphy as well, helping with questions. Thanks very much for joining us today. What we'll be covering today, the first thing, there was a new grant announced yesterday. We'll be going through it at a high level. It's an excellent grant. It's nothing to do with the CEG or the Community Energy Grant, despite that the name is similar. It's called the Community Centre Investment Fund. So we'll be going through some of the details of that just to start off with, just because it's a new grant that's been announced. And then we'll go into, I suppose, what the webinar is about, the CEG, the community. It's grants basically for community, commercial buildings and domestic houses that are all grouped together. And we'll talk a little bit about that structure, how it all comes together. We'll be going into then the domestic grants, how they differ, and the number of grants that are out there, the CEG, the one-stop shop and the BEH, and maybe where they might be used. We'll just touch briefly on the vacant and derelict grants, that they're out there as well. They can be claimed as alongside the CEG and the domestic grants, and we'll be going through some case studies of that. As well as that, we'll be going through the commercial grants. So there's multiple options available. The grant amount depends on your organisation type. So if you're a community centre, you might get up to 50%. If it's a commercial element or a business, you might get up to 30%. And we'll be going through some case studies of those as well. And we'll have time for Q&A as well. There is a Q&A box down at the bottom of your screens, hopefully. Feel free to put in your questions. If you're looking for CPD points as well, put them in there, and we'll go through them as well. And Davey and Conor will answer them as we're going down through them, and I'll address as many as I can. Shane, you might keep an eye on them then there as well.
Yeah, I will. John, could I just add to that before you go on? We started doing this talk probably a year ago on community energy grants, and the reason was that when, there's a few different home grants out there. There was the one-stop shop, there was a Better Energy Homes, but the CEG was a grant that's kind of the same as one-stop shop with some minor differences. But a lot of people actually didn't think it existed because they couldn't find much evidence of it anywhere if they went Googling. And but it is, and it's not, to be fair, an intuitive name for a house or a domestic project. Community energy grant, surely that's community stuff, and it is. But houses are part of the community, obviously, and so that's the reason we started running this webinar in particular, to explain what the community grant is. We've heard plenty about the other grants, and so that's the purpose of today. So we'll be going through, obviously, the housing side of it. We'll go through the community side of it, and we'll go through, some sort of maybe I know we have a commercial project in here that will be getting whatever 30% towards their building upgrades on the energy side. So anyway, that's just the context to add on to what John said.
Thanks, Shane. So just a small bit about Ashgrove. I don't know, Shane, do you want to go down through this?
I'm nearly sick of giving this slide, Johnny, but yeah, we're doing so many webinars. But
that's the enthusiasm we want to see from our webinar hosts.
I know it is, isn't it? Look, Ashgrove is in business since 2001. We're home energy specialists. I suppose we were originally heat pump, solar, ventilation, underfloor heating, underfloor cooling guys. More recently, I suppose, from kind of 2020 on, we really started to focus on the home energy upgrade side as well. Now, I should say that, of course, that includes installation, windows, doors, etc. But we were always involved in heating and cooling and heat pumps in kind of commercial, industrial stuff, up to kind of much larger buildings, abattoirs, hotels, food processing facilities. But so anyway, we'll be covering the housing today. We'll be covering the commercial side of it today. But again, it'll be from an energy and the retention of energy side. So insulation, ventilation, windows, doors, etc. Sorry, Johnny, you might scoot on.
Yeah.
So look, today we're a one-stop shop. We're a community energy grant coordinator. We're Better Energy Homes contractor. So that's anything to do with SEAI. Just to give an idea of, I suppose, the scale of the business, if we take out the approved housing bodies in Ireland, last year we did whatever 18% of the one-stop shop and community energy projects. That's on the domestic side. So that's not to, people might think that's boasting. I suppose in one way it is, but we have we're doing a lot of these. We know how they work, we know how they don't work, and importantly, I suppose, and this is very important for some people, especially with more technical or difficult projects, we're a phone call away from the guy who makes the decisions, and we get the yay or nay then, and maybe we have to tweak the project or whatever. But any project, we will know before we start that it'll come out the far side. And Ashgrove has the highest pass results in the country. All of these projects, sorry, not all, but the number of them that are inspected, we have a 96% first-time pass rate. That means when they come out to look at all of our projects, 96% of them pass on the spot. 4% we might need to add stickers, or they might have found something that they didn't like on the QA. But the national average is 42. So that gives you an idea. We're very good at paperwork. We have a lot of people doing it now, to be fair. But yeah, anyway, again, it does sound like boasting. Anyway, you go about it, I suppose, John, does it? We have a lot of people in the office today. It's 89 people. And again, they're there to take calls, do paperwork, but keep the project on track and make sure it comes out successfully out the far side. We're still looking for parts of the country. We're looking for BER assessors. We're looking for plumbers. We're looking for builders who are willing to do upgrades alongside us. In some parts of the country where our network is not as strong maybe as it is in other parts. Anybody who's interested in working with us, please reach out to us and we'll be happy to talk to you. We'll be delighted to talk to you, in fact. And we're on the road full time as I am today, going around meeting guys that want in some shape or form to partner with us. We're delighted to do so. We do a lot of these free information events in whatever shape. I think this is probably the fourth one this week. And the online ones or the face-to-face ones are CPD point eligible. And by the way, the seminars or the webinars, if anybody out there, architects, engineers, BER assessors, councillors, whatever it is, we're happy to do webinars with you if you want us to do to cover a topic that's interesting for you in your part of the country. We're happy to do them. Obviously, there'll come a point where we won't be able to do them all, I suppose. But at the moment, we're frantically trying to get to as many as we can. Yeah. Our grant app is called whatgrant.ie. That's, I suppose, anything to do with any type of grant, whether it's a community grant, a community centre grant that we're just going to be talking about in a minute. That isn't up there. It only came out yesterday, so that'll be up there in the next week. But, you know, what are the important things? What are the criteria? We'll probably put in a 5-minute video there explaining where it's usable, where it's not usable, maybe more importantly, because sometimes when you read about this stuff, you've plenty of information, but actually the practicalities sometimes get lost. Yeah, so the What Grant app is, we want that to be a kind of a one-stop shop for anything to do with grants. Johnny, do you want to launch into that one?
Yeah, I'll just give a very high-level overview of the Community Centre Investment Fund. As I said at the start, it's nothing to do with the CEG, it's nothing to do with SEAI, but it is a grant that was announced yesterday, and it's a very good grant. It's for community centres that have been in use for the past 2 years, so existing community centres that are providing a facility to the community. They can run bingo nights or yoga or whatever it is, that sort of stuff. There's funding available of up to 100,000. 95% of that is covered for the smaller projects, and 90% of it is covered for the larger projects. So for over 25,000, between 25,000 and 100,000, you get 90% funding. You have 18 months to complete the works for a larger one and 15 months to complete it for the smaller ones. The range of works that's covered by this is vast. Now, we're still getting our head around the details of it, which is kind of yet to come out. But anything from painting and decorating, fire, access, doing up, getting new kitchens in, all that sort of stuff. There's a wide range of things that are covered
Yeah, buying new kit, if you had a gym or something like that, buying new kit, televisions, and so on. But the one thing, I suppose, the first thing it says when you read down through it, I read it last night and again this morning, it's refurbishment. So it looks to be definitely pointing away from any sort of extensions or building. So, but I think more or less anything else is allowable.
I think extensions are allowed, Shane. I've
Yeah.
read a different part of the document too, but it can't be for a new community centre. So if you have an old building in the town that you want to turn into a community centre, it doesn't fund that. It's for a community centre that is in existence, but you can do building works and modification works and extensions to existing ones. I don't like contradicting Shane now because he's normally right, unfortunately, but I'm sure I'll hear about it if I'm wrong.
Doesn't stop you.
I'm fairly sure extensions are covered.
Okay.
The application portal is opening the end of May. I think it's 29th of May is the provisional date they put on it, and the closing date is the 13th of July. So there's an hour enough window to apply for these things. There's also a maximum grant. I think it's 25 million that's made available for it. So that's 250 projects if everybody claims 100,000. So really getting the applications prepped, and I know we've been talking to a number of people already, getting them prepped and getting it ready to go on the 29th of May. We're assuming it's going to be a first come first served basis, but we don't know that for a fact.
Now, but if that's the case, well, it mightn't be first come first serve. It might be the strongest application.
Correct. Yeah.
And what they've done in cases like this before, especially when it's when politics is thrown into the mix, what they might do is they might take that 25 million, and if there was 1,000 applications, they'd split it across the 1,000 and give them all 45k or whatever it would be. What importantly then what happens is you need to know what other funding you can put with that to get you to your 100% or to get you to the 90%. So could I use CLAR funding? Could I use whatever it is, leader funding? Could I use Enterprise Ireland, SEAI, whatever it is? So I am allowed, not in all cases, but I'm allowed in a lot of cases to co-fund. I just can't duplicate fund. So I can't get two funds. I can't get two grants for the same thing. So essentially, I'm up money at the end of it. But so some of the mechanisms are firmly against even topping up, if you know what I mean. But some of them have no problem with you topping it up to the 100% once you don't go over the 100%, if that makes sense.
So that's, as I said, it kind of nothing to do with the topic of the webinar today, but I think it was an important thing just to put out there to make sure people are aware of it. So hope that was useful. We'll go into the community energy grant stuff now. So this the CEG, SEAI's CEG grant, and how it works. As Shane said at the start, there was a lot of confusion around this. There's not a lot of publicity around it from SEAI. I suppose they're more promoting the one-stop shop rather than the CEG. The CEG has all the same grant amounts as the one-stop shop for domestic projects, but the project coordinator, Ashgrove, or whoever the project coordinator is, needs to bundle those houses with a community project or a commercial project, and maybe 50 houses, maybe 60, maybe 70 houses, and submit that to SEAI. SEAI give approval, and then we go and do the works, and we submit our paperwork then in various stages to SEAI. Once we have maybe 25 houses done, we'll submit a batch. Then when we have another 20 done, we'll submit another batch. So that's why it's called the community energy grant from a project coordinator, and from SEAI's side, it is a community energy grant for any individual homeowner or potential business. It doesn't matter that it's community, it's up to the project coordinator to ensure that the community aspect is fulfilled. So for the community or the commercial grants, the value is based on a percentage of the works, so it's between 15 and 50% of the cost of the measures that you're doing, so the cost of the energy upgrade works that you're doing. And the domestic grants, they're fixed grant amounts, but they're exactly aligned with the one-stop shop program. So it's all the same grant amounts, all the same grant eligibility criteria. There is a slightly different contractual arrangement, which means for I suppose particularly maybe vacant and derelict houses, or for projects where there's construction or builders works involved, Ashgrove believe that the community energy grant, that contractual arrangement, facilitates those upgrades a lot easier, gives the homeowner a lot more options on what to do. So that's the explanation of, I suppose, why it's called a CEG or the Community Energy Grant. As I said, to any individual homeowner or business, they don't care that it's the Community Energy Grant. It's up to the project coordinator to facilitate that. So just going through each of the stages for domestic and for non-domestic. So pre-application, if it's a domestic project, we still have to get your pre-works BER done. If it's a non-domestic project, it's an energy audit is what needs to be done. The application phase, then we apply for this through to SEAI. For domestic houses, when we're putting in a batch of 50 houses, we give them a sample of the BERs that might go into that batch. They don't expect us to name each individual house that's going into that batch. So we have a bit of flexibility. We have maybe 3 or 4 applications open at any one time, and they all have different end dates. And so we can move houses into whichever application suits the end date. So there's flexibility on the domestic side. For the non-domestic side, it is more specific. There's technical supporting documents needed. There's measurement and verification plans needed. Quality assurance plans, all that sort of stuff is needed for the non-domestic projects. We're awarded funding, as I said, for the domestic, it's fixed per measure. So your attic insulation will be 2,000, your heat pump will be 12,500, including central heating. For the non-domestic, it's a percentage of the cost of the works. That percentage depends on how much works you're doing and what organisation type you are. If you're a not-for-profit or a charity, slightly different to a commercial or a business. Carry out the works, same in non-domestic and domestic. There may be interim inspections from SEAI in non-domestic projects. And then verification of savings. For the domestic side, we only need a post-works BER. So what SEAI are looking at on the domestic side is the difference between the pre-works BER to the post-works BER. How much has that house improved? And they can see that from the BER, and then they're happy to give out the grants. On the non-domestic, it might be slightly more difficult to confirm. You might that's why the measurement and verification plan is needed to verify those savings, because those savings could come from a pump that's running that's not captured in a non-domestic BER. So you've upgraded a pump that has made energy savings, but that M&V plan needs to capture that.
John, the only place that doesn't apply, obviously, as you know, is that we'd say the case study we're going to look at in a second. We're doing up our own building. We bought a building a year ago. It's 24,000 square feet. We're doing up offices and re-insulating the building, etc. We obviously, with new insulation, new windows, new heating system, solar panels, all the rest of it, the building energy consumption comes down. If we don't have a heat pump in there, we're expected to do the measurement and verification to say that we save the 20%. Once a heat pump comes into the equation, we do not have to jump through that hoop. It's assumed that the heat pump is, I don't know why they've taken this view, but if there's a heat pump in the equation, you no longer have to hit that. Sorry, you're not expected to prove that you're hitting 20%. It's not that you don't have to hit it, but it's assumed that you will.
Yeah, I think in general, they're really pushing for heat pumps to be pushing. They want to make it as easy as possible for businesses to upgrade to heat pumps. And I suppose removing the M&V requirement there, particularly because it's in 99% of cases, you definitely will hit the 20% improvement and then some. So they've removed that as a barrier just to try and, I'd say, make it slightly easier and incentivize people to go ahead with it. And after that, you get full payment. In some cases, on the non-domestic side, they may withhold 10% until the M&V is complete. So until we verify that those savings have actually been achieved, they may withhold that 10%. That's in some cases, not all cases. So that's the kind of overview between the process for the domestic and the commercial side. We're going to go into the specifics of the domestic now, and then we'll go into the commercial afterwards. So there's a number of different grant programs, as we said at the start, CEG, one-stop shop, individual energy upgrades. There's also pilot schemes, the traditional homes pilot, the residential heat pump, and the high temperature heat pump pilot schemes. The pilot schemes, I think maybe the people get excited when they hear pilot schemes, thinking they get it all for free. The pilot schemes actually have no greater grant amounts, so you're getting the same grant amounts. All they've done is relaxed some of the eligibility criteria. And what they're trying to do is figure out, how do we treat those difficult scenarios? So for the traditional homes pilot, where insulation is required, specific vapor open insulation is required on walls, then we can't hit the U values required for the mainstream grants, and so they have this pilot scheme in there to gather data, and it allowed them to roll out that information or the findings from that pilot scheme into the mainstream grants. So they're all administered by SEAI. You also have the vacant and derelict house grant, which can be claimed alongside any of those grants as well. So you can co-fund houses, I suppose, with those two types of grants. The vacant house and derelict house grant is administered through the local authority, so it's completely separate to SEAI, but you can claim both of them. There was a grant announcement in the end of January, which I'll just fly through some of the financial changes. Basically, it was increased grant amounts. The attic insulation went up by €500 for a detached house. It went up by another €500 if it's a first-time buyer on a detached house. Cavity wall insulation went up €100, and the heat pump grant went up to 12,500. So all good news and all grant increases. The eligibility criteria was also changed for a few instances. No max pre-BER. This was important for people who'd already done solar, which maybe has brought up their BER, now brought them back into the mix for getting the CEG grants or the one-stop shop grants. So the max starting point on the BER scale has been removed. And they've also removed, similar to what we were talking about for the verification on the non-domestic stuff, if you've put in a heat pump, they've assumed that you're going to hit the required uplift, or that you've done all the right things up until that point. So they've removed the specific BER improvement for a heat pump as well. The big headline, of course, was that windows and doors was available as an individual measure. That's what really took over the media talk about all the grant announcement. There is some specifics. There is caution to go with that. You have to hit specific U values on your wall in your attic, or your HLI has to come down low enough. And you also have to be very careful of ventilation. When you're upgrading your windows, they want to see that you have sufficient ventilation in the house, and there's specific criteria that need to be hit in order to achieve that ventilation. So it's 6,500 millimeters squared per domestic room, and extractor fans in bathrooms and wet rooms. So there's specific criteria that needs to be met for ventilation, which I suppose I'm worried that maybe a lot of the country doesn't understand, or a lot of the windows installers maybe don't understand, and could lead to problems and bad press. This is what I'm really worried about, that they won't get their grants at the end. But yeah, so that's the grants that were announced at the end of January.
John, just before we go away from that,
yeah,
by the way, that was announced on the 27th of January, and there has been probably, I'm going to say, 4 updates since. So at the moment, we're being told, I suppose, definitively what the now answer is, but we heard all the definitive answers before now. But it seems that you don't have to change all windows, and you can still get the grant, which might sound great. I suppose for anybody outside the industry, it probably is great, but for anybody interested in saving carbon, it's idiotic. But importantly, Johnny, there, when you're talking about ventilation, if what we heard now yesterday or the day before is now the fact going forward, you can change some of the windows and still get the grant once the attic and walls are up to the minimum required U values. Do I have to meet the ventilation requirements in the rooms where the windows are changed, or do I have to meet the minimum ventilation requirements in all rooms?
Very good question, Shane.
That only just occurred to me there. And
Yeah,
again, for the people on the call there, sorry for putting Johnny on the spot, but these things are, evolving nearly by the day. And
yeah,
or the phones are absolutely hopping with this one. And, the likes of that question I just asked John there, there will be people coming unstuck with something like that, but we don't have the information yet from SEAI, unfortunately.
yeah. We've I'm talking to them nearly daily at this stage with updates. And I suppose, in fairness to SEAI, when they announce any of these things, it's probably impossible for them to think of every single scenario and put all that in the guidance document, because the guidance document will be 400 pages long to start with, and inevitably they won't think of something. So those scenarios, as we're coming across them, we're getting verification on them. Unfortunately, sometimes, as Shane said, that changes from day to day. And so we're still, yeah, there's still a lot of grey area there that we're
Well,
trying to box
in
off.
this case, Johnny, of course, it was even worse. They didn't release this at all themselves. In fact, SEI didn't agree with it. This was released by the department, and SEI were scrambling the same as everybody else. Okay, what's the detail here? So they were as behind as we were. But anyway, it is what it is, right? And overall, I suppose we'd have to say SEI are doing a great job. But our phones are absolutely hopping at the moment. We can't stay up with it, but in some cases we don't have answers. But people are getting cranky with us. We're not giving out the grants, obviously. We're only handing them over from the government. But people are, in some cases, taking it out on us. Anyway, we're big boys. We don't mind it, but it's really busy at the moment. Anyway, sorry, Johnny.
All right. So these are the individual grant values for upgrading a domestic house through the CEG. Or through the BH, sorry, you can get access to all these grant amounts. The items in green there are the ones that were newly added to the individual grants. So windows and doors being the popular one in there, but there was also an increased grant amount of 6,000 there for heat pump. The one-stop shop grant amounts are all the same. You do, by going through the one-stop shop or the CEG, you do unlock additional grants. So mechanical ventilation, air tightness, floor insulation, project management, rafter and home energy assessment. So you do unlock additional grants. That's about 11,350. Now, for transparency, it's very rare that a house will get all of those, that full 11,350 upgrade, but 10 and a half or 10 is probably realistic. Um, in order to get
John,
qualified, yeah,
sorry, can you go back a slide?
I can.
Um, On top of that 11,000, to be fair, there are energy credits. I know we'll be covering it later on, right? And I suppose by the day now, again, this is evolving. It's been something I suppose the industry has been grappling with for probably the last, I'm going to say 2 years. The methodology for dealing with it has been changing. The portal for uploading the energy credit stuff has been changing. The calculations have been changing, and all the rest of it. But it's probably going to start finally getting resolved, I would say, in the next few months. So that's good. So in the better energy homes, in all of these cases, you can get energy credits. In the case of the one-stop shop or the community energy grant, the coordinator, the company you're dealing with, gets the energy credits on your behalf and trades them. In the other case, there on the left, in theory, you can trade them yourself. The reality is nobody will deal with you. So that's probably another thing to be taken into consideration there. And I would say, whilst it hasn't been, I don't think it's been overly successful the way it has been running for the last few years. I think it's going to start happening now. So anyway, the point is there's additional monies there that you don't see on that scale. But I think in the next quarter, the better energy homes will be less favorable, let's say.
Yeah, and again, another area that we're just trying to get clarification on. We've been kind of given a timeline of maybe 3 or 4 months that we're hoping this is rolled out, and we have a definitive process for these energy credits and how they're distributed and managed. So yeah, that'll be coming down the line in the next few weeks / months, hopefully. In order to qualify for the CEG or the one-stop shop, they do want you to get to a BER rating of a B2 or higher. So when the works are complete, a B2 or higher. They also want you to get 100 kilowatt hour per meter squared uplift. It's basically kind of maybe a minimum of a 4-step increase on your BER. If you're installing a heat pump, they're not looking for that uplift. So that was one of the changes that they brought out they announced at the end of January. So they don't need you to get that 100 or that 4-step increase on the BER. If you're putting in a heat pump, they've acknowledged that, yeah, you're probably going to get it anyway. And if you don't, it means that your house was already very good. So you're just doing the last piece in the puzzle. The important thing for domestic and commercial projects, all these things are calculated prior to works commencing. So there's no scenario here where you're start works and sure, hopefully we'll get the grants at the end. Everything is calculated before we start works. There's a specification done that needs to be adhered to. And once that's adhered to, then we know we're going to get the grants at the end. So as well as the house achieving an overall BER rating, individual elements need to be to a certain standard as well. And for the fabric elements, that standard is a U value, or one of those standards is a U value, the main one. So for example, in Windows, if you're installing Windows, they want you to install Windows of U value of 1.4 or better. They don't want to give you a grant for installing a second-hand window that you bought somewhere. So that might have a U value of maybe 1.8 or 2 and isn't a very good window. So now they're grant aiding you but you're not saving a lot of carbon. So they want it to be to a good standard. None of those standards are very difficult to achieve. Your attic insulation there is 0.16. That's 300 mil of fiberglass rolled out in your attic. As I said, windows are 1.4. That's a double glazed unit. Doesn't have to be a triple glazed unit. Obviously, you can go better. You can go triple glazed. That's no problem. But you don't have to in order to meet the grant criteria in most cases. There is scenarios where the minimum U values that you need to do won't be enough. And that's, I suppose, why we're here, and or your project coordinator or your one-stop shop will be able to advise you that no, actually you need to go to slightly better on your windows in order to counteract something else that mightn't be very well insulated. So that's where that calculation comes in is important, is to ensure that we're hitting all the criteria, not just one element and forgetting about some other part of it. It's viewed both as individual elements and as the building as a whole is assessed. So a case study just for a CEG, this is a project we've done with the original house. Obviously, you can see in the picture, it's going to need a lot of work from that picture in order to bring it up to spec. There was also a large extension put onto this house, so there was a lot of builders' works happening. The grants technically, the grants definitely are only for upgrading the elements of the individual house. So if you had a very unusual scenario, I would have to say, where you were only adding an extension and not adding, with these types of houses anyway, if you were only adding an extension and not upgrading any part of the existing house, then you were not eligible for the SEAI grants. So it's only for upgrading the fabric elements of the existing house. The logic behind that is, if you're building an extension, you have to build it to modern building regs. They don't want to give you grants for building something that you're legally required to do. So the grants are there to incentivize you to do something, not necessarily for to help you achieve your legal requirement of the building regs. So it's only there for upgrading the elements of the existing part of the house. And where this is maybe a most clear example is on the doors. You can see here this house had 2 doors, so the front door here and the back door here. Obviously, now that the extension is being added on here where that back door was, that is no longer an external door, and the new external door is here. So that means you're not getting a grant for 2 external doors, you're only getting a grant for the front door here on the main part of the house. So that's just an example. There's other little nuances that just need to be taken account of and be made aware of as you're doing these types of projects. Yeah. For that, upgrading that house, the grant amounts here were the 38,250 in total. You can see that's a summation of all the individual elements: attic insulation, external wall, your external doors, your floor insulation, air tightness, home energy assessment, and project management grant. And as we said, Shane spoke about it earlier, the energy credits is extra on top of that. And hopefully that'll become clearer in the next few weeks and months, and that we'll have a defined system for that. So in order to get those grant works through the CEG, what we do is we give a specification to your builder. We're happy to talk through it with you as a homeowner, a builder, architect, engineer, whoever else needs to hear about it, if you like, or whoever else is interested. What we're very conscious of is when anybody's doing this type of work, there's 100 or 1,000 decisions that they have to make. And the last thing they want to be trying to understand is U values and trying to communicate that from Ashgrove to the builder or to their architect. We're happy to talk directly to the builder or the architect to ensure that there's nothing lost in translation. And if there's any questions, we're at the end of the phone. So there's a lot of maybe technical specifications here, thermal conductivity and U values on this page. As a homeowner, don't be overwhelmed by it. We're here to try and make that as easy as possible, and we're happy to talk through whichever professional you have engaged to make sure they understand it as well. I'm going to give an example. Time has drifted on, so I'm going to go through quickly of how a one-stop shop is maybe slightly different. These are estate houses in Mallow that were being lived in, occupied. They were C2. They were looking to get a green mortgage, so they just actually rang us for solar panels, which would have got them up above the B3. But we did the analysis on the house and put an alternative proposal in front of them. We were happy to do the solar panels, obviously, but we didn't want them to miss out on the opportunity. So we did the attic and cavity walls. We did an air-to-water heat pump, solar panels and windows and doors, and an EV charger. And we did that for €15,100 at the time. So, and that 15,000 is obviously net of the grants. The total works cost 37,356. We got €22,250 of grants. But as far as the homeowner was concerned, they only have to pay us the 15,106. We do the works, and we gather all the paperwork, submit it to SEAI, and then get the SEAI pay us the grants. But the homeowner essentially doesn't care if we get the grants or not. They've paid us the 15,106. It's up to us to make sure that we get it. So they got from a C2 to an A2 in this scenario. The main difference between this and the CEG is under the one-stop shop, we're obliged to give the homeowner the cost net of the grants. That's fine in this scenario where the works, well, in theory anyway, could be done in maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but it's all within Ashgrove's control. And so it's up to us how quickly we do it. And so we're then on the hook for the grants until the end. If you were to do a CEG project like this, that project might take 14, 15, 16, 17 months maybe, and it is largely out of Ashgrove's control how long it takes. So it's down to the builder or maybe the homeowner making decisions or whatever it is. But Ashgrove are still waiting for that grant money until the end. And whatever way you do it, if you do that through one-stop shop and the project is slow, there's a cost involved in funding that project or funding the grant elements of that project for the 14, 15, 16 months. So that's why we think the CEG is a better contractual mechanism. It gives the homeowner more options in terms of contractors. It's easier integration with the existing contractor than the one-stop shop. And it also removes that potential extra cost that the homeowner could be paying because they're now have a mortgage, which was the case in the previous example we looked at. They were getting a mortgage to build that big extension, and they were also coming to Ashgrove for essentially a loan of the grants if we went down through the one-stop shop. So yeah, we think the CEG is great for that type of project. We think the one-stop shop is super for these type of projects. And on top of that, worth bearing in mind, there's a Hughes a home energy upgrade loan scheme that's available for projects that are claiming SEAI grants. And that interest rate, it's an unsecured loan with an interest rate as low as 3%, depending on your bank. So it's yeah, it's a very attractive offering, allows you to spread out the cost, that 15,000 over 5, 10, 7 years, whatever you want to do, up to between 2 and 10 years. So on to the commercial element of the grants. So there's a wider range of grants available for commercial support. The CEG obviously is the one we're talking about today, but there's also the BU, the SSRH, MUDS, which is for apartments, Exceed, and the commercial solar grant. So they're all SEAI grants that are available for doing up a community centre or for doing up commercial premises or a not-for-profit building. So the CEG is one of those, and a very good one. There is also funding available through Leader Enterprise Ireland and the local enterprise office as well. They're not focused on energy upgrades. They're more for, I suppose, commercial aspects of businesses, be they for export or anything like that. But in the majority of these, there is an allowance for co-funding from both the SEI side and from the either Leader Enterprise Ireland or local enterprise office funds. So,
John, in the next 2 or 3 weeks, we're hoping that all of those, even though you're saying the bottom there, the Leader, the Enterprise Ireland, IDA, and local enterprise, okay, they're not solely for energy, but they can be used for energy projects. But for any of those community things, or even the things that we're not involved with, those grants, we're hoping to have, I suppose, a compendium, an exhaustive list of the various grant types, what they're suited to, what maybe they're not suited to. For example, there's a better energy, upgrade for boilers and stuff, BEUs, which is a 30% grant, but there might well be a 40 or a 50% grant someplace else that you might not be aware of. And so we're going to have all of those grants in one place. It'll probably be on our What Grant app that it'll be accessible to the public. We're trying to make it simple that I can co-fund, as we said earlier. But anyway, it's quite a big list, as you can imagine, but we're trying to make it as easy as possible for an untrained person to navigate their way through it and see the pros and cons of each. Anyway.
This is probably the start of it. So as well as the different grant types, you have different, I suppose, organisation types as well. You've not-for-profit or community clubs, you've SMEs, you've public bodies, and you've large enterprises. So there's different grant amounts through the community energy upgrade grant, as you can see there. There's all different grant amounts. Again, depends on state aid rules, and if there's an economic activity, you might not qualify for the 50% for even though it's not for profit. So there's a lot of variables in there, and that's just on the community energy grant. This is the start, I suppose, of what Shane was talking about. We try to make it easier than this to understand, but this is the start of the kind of the matrix that we're looking at, which is dependent on what organizational type are you and what are you looking at doing, which might dictate then which the best grant for you to go down through is. So, and obviously the percentage or the value of the grants that you're getting is one of the big dictators for where you want to go down. Just in terms of the commercial or the community grants for not-for-profit buildings or community buildings, an energy audit is often the way to start. There is a €2,000 voucher for an energy audit if your spend is over €10,000 annually. After that, then we're, or whichever person you're dealing with, is looking at which is the best pathway for you. So back to the previous slide of which is the best grant for you to get. It may be the community energy grant is the right way to go. If so, great. It might be that SSRH is the correct thing to do for this particular project, depending on timelines, scale of project, a lot of variables in there. We submit the documentation, then do the application, we get the letter of offer, and then execute. So important that we get grant approval before we start any works on the commercial projects. The principle of that is you can only get grant aided for works that have not been done yet. They don't want to give you grants retrospectively for works that you completed 12 months ago. So they want, or even a week ago, they want you to have your letter of offer and then you start works. And from then on, you can claim grants for those works. After all the works are submitted, then you can draw down the grants. And there is, as we said earlier, a verification part that may be required depending on the works you're doing and depending on the size of the projects. And that's where your energy credit rebates as well come in for your commercial grants. Just an example of a project. This is the one Shane was talking about earlier. So it's an office and warehouse renovation. There's a lot of works happening here, replacing the roof, the external facade, upgrading the heating system, but there's also an internal fit out element where we're putting in desks, rewiring, putting in access systems, all that CCTV, all that sort of stuff. So we can apply through the community energy grants for this. The total project is just over 1.2 million. 668,000 of that is for the energy elements of it. So that's the roof, the heating system, the external facade, the windows. Excluded from that would be the likes of the door access system or the internal fit out desks and all the computers and all that sort of stuff. They are not eligible costs because they're nothing to do with energy upgrades. But there is 30% of grant there, I think 201, less than 30%, but that's the grant funding that's available for that type of project based on a 668k spend on energy upgrades. This is another example of a project that just got solar. So we got obviously the SEAI non-domestic microgeneration grant for the solar. The project cost was 252k. Obviously, all of that is eligible because the only works we were doing was installing the solar system. So 100% of that cost was eligible. And for that, we got just over 22% funding. So nearly 57k of a grant for that. The payback on that system was about 3.5 years. And this is another example that went through the community energy grant again. So it's a daycare centre that got heat pump and fabric upgrades as well as solar PV. The project value was 431k. It was only energy upgrade works again that was happening here. So all of that was eligible. And the grant amount for that was 33%. So 143k of a grant gotten back for that. So you can see the grant amounts are substantial. They're trying to incentivize you to do energy upgrades. For the SEAI and for the community energy grants, it's all about reducing carbon. So increasing the insulation, which reduces the amount of heat is required, producing that heat as efficiently as possible, and also, I suppose, producing solar electricity or solar generated electricity, which is zero carbon as it's generated at least.
John, can I just add on there, by the way?
Yeah.
That project that we're looking at there is, I can't remember what it was, but it was essentially, I'm going to say it's sheltered housing, I think, with a community aspect to it, a community centre, a community building. But that's insulation, that's heat pumps, there's windows, doors. So Ashgrove, in this case, did all the work, right? If you go back to the one before it, it's a solar project. Now, this is, we were talking earlier about 20 or 30% grants. If they had done other work here, so if they had done insulation works, if they had heat pumps put in, if they did some windows or whatever, that grant would jump to probably the 30%. We'd have to put our case forward. But if they're not doing a lot of works, they might pull it down a little bit. At the end of the day, it's cost, it's euro per kilowatt hours saved is what they're looking at, and they'll come up with a fair figure. But again, in this case, Ashgrove would have done the installation. It's actually double what you can see in that photo. So there's a lot of solar panels there. But go back another one, Johnny. Maybe interestingly, I know that this building is actually our own, but just say it's not. It's ABC Limited in Mullingar. They can actually once they tell us what they're doing, we go and check if that's all going to get grants. We get them a letter of offer. They can actually go and do that work themselves. Okay, so obviously heat pumps and stuff like that have to be signed off by SEAI registered guys and so on, but lots of it you don't have to be. I mean, changing a roof in insulated cladding and so on is maybe not, you don't need to be registered for that. But ultimately, so the point is, Ashgrove don't have to do this work. Obviously, we'd love if we could do some of it somewhere along the way, but we don't insist on it, by the way. And we'll sit on the sideline here. John, when you divided the 668 there, divided by the 30%, we've removed a fee from that. So if you take 1/3 of that, it's 220, whatever it is, three, or yeah. So there's 22K of a fee taken out there, which would be a typical fee that we would charge on a project like that. Okay. And anyway, that's it. I just wanted to make the point that sometimes we do all the work, sometimes we do not do any of the work, only do the grant administration for people.
The important thing when we're not doing the work is that we'd stick to the specification that's been agreed at the start. And that's the key thing. And as I said, it's the same with the domestic as the commercial. We're happy to talk to whoever's involved there to make sure they understand it. But as Shane always says, our opinion is worth nothing here. It's what does the calculation tell us we need to do, and adhering to that is the important thing when other people are doing it. And as Shane said, there's a lot of projects going through us at the moment where other people are doing works, and that's no issue. And we are talking to them, engaging with them, and we're happy to do that. To make sure that they adhere to the spec as the project progresses. And if there is variations that happen, or if there is some reason why something can't be done, pick up the phone, have the conversation with us before we start just driving on and doing the alternative, because that's the only option we have. We can put that in front of SEAI and say, look, we can't do this in this scenario because of reason X. And SEAI will give us, in general, will give us approval for that to drive on, but they don't want to find out when they come out and do an inspection that we change doing something because sure, it was easier for us to do it this way. They're not as quick to accept that.
Yeah. John, could I just, now we're looking at that building there, one difference between that commercial building and a domestic CEG or even a one-stop shop. In the one-stop shop, if we're doing floor insulation, we're getting a grant for it. We have to insulate all of the floor. If we're getting an attic insulation grant, there are some exceptions. You have to insulate all of the available attic. You have to change all of the windows under the one-stop shop or CEG. So you're kind of doing everything. Or if you're doing external wall insulation, you have to do the full house. In this case, we could, as we are actually doing here, we're changing the roof on half of the building, half of it is okay. So we're just getting that element. If we turned around in 5 years' time and wanted to do the rest of it, we'd be entitled to a grant for that again. Okay. The one thing we didn't say here, by the way, these all looked like fabric measures and heating measures. If you had something like a big motor, say you had a motor the size of this office here that was blowing air, or it was pumping water, or doing whatever it was, and last year it used 1 million kilowatt hours, and the new one you're putting in is going to use 300,000 kilowatt hours, you'll get a grant for, say if that pump is 100 grand, you'll get a grant of, I'm going to say 22,000 for that, because it's only a single measure. If you were doing the pump, insulation, solar, ventilate, whatever, you'd be shoving on towards the 30%. So it's not just fabric, it's anything that is consuming kilowatt hours, and we're making it better. Yes, we have to prove it and all the rest of it in those cases. But anyway, just wanted to make the point because we didn't have any case study showing that here.
Yes.
Apologies, Johnny.
You're all right. No, I hope people in general, that's kind of the end of our talk or the information. Hopefully you found it useful and you're not more confused than you were coming in. There is a lot of variables. It sounds like there's an awful lot of moving parts there, and certainly when you're not dealing with it day to day, it can seem very overwhelming. Some of the information when we're talking, we nearly take it for granted, and so we can gloss over it. But we are here to, I suppose, provide assistance. So if there is questions, feel free to pick up the phone. We're happy to have a chat. I suppose certainly from whether it's domestic or commercial, the first step is always just have a chat. I know I went through energy audits and all that sort of stuff, but picking up the phone and making sure getting an energy audit done before you start doing anything is the correct thing to do. And we'll be able to advise you, whether an energy audit is the right thing to do or whether you're wasting your money.
Danny, could I add before you go on to what's the upcoming events?
Yeah.
There's one thing that we're expecting to drop, I suppose, or the final detail to come in the next, unless you've covered it here, is the above the shop vacant and derelict grant. So if you had a shop in a town or a village like we've all seen around the country that is vacant and derelict, the announced grant just before Christmas was 140,000. So the first apartment that you bring back into use, you're getting 95,000 for it. The second one is a further 20, and the third one is a further 20. That's 135. And they'll give you 5 then for architects' fees or engineering fees for coordinating with the council or whatever it is. We don't know what the detail of it is yet, but it is coming. The reason I'm mentioning it, by the way, it sits side by side with the CEG grant, because on top of the 140, you're entitled to get CEG energy upgrade grants for each of those apartments. So you could have maybe another 12, 13, 14 through the CEG. So that's shoving you on towards 170 or 80,000. In some cases, it might make more sense to go through the MUDS grant in that case. So you get the 140 and you might get another 100. Right, and then for the commercial unit in the base or in on the ground floor, there's a commercial grant available. So that might be, if you're changing the windows, insulation, heating system, ventilation, lighting, etc. That could be another 20. It could be 25. In that case, it would be the 30% we just looked at a while ago. Anyway, that above the shop space is about to become a hot topic, side by side with the CEG. Right, but we expect those to be kind of shoving towards the 200,000 euro grant mark. At the moment, the eligibility looks like it's for micro company. Sorry, the vacant and derelict grant. Previously, you had to be a private individual, right? We understand why that would be for a house out in the country. They don't want Ashgrove or a Dell or whoever it is buying up houses and keeping poor Mary and Johnny out of the housing market. So that was the reason for that. But for the house sitting inside in the middle of whatever town, Mullingar or wherever it is, that has a shop downstairs that hasn't been used in 10 years and 2 or 3 apartments over, a lot of those are owned by smaller companies. So at the moment, they're saying that they're considering opening that up to micro companies, which would be great. We think it would be logical at the very least anyway. And some of the rules for the vacant and derelict, as a consequence, will have to change. We'll talk about that. But any of you who are not maybe I'm seeing some of the numbers here, our names. I know a lot of you are on our mailing list. Any of you who've happened to come across this webinar by chance, if you want to get those updates, make sure that you send us an email to be included, and you'll get the updates when they come. That's all I have to say, Johnny.
Yeah, super. I'll just go down through the next webinars that are coming up. So the 10th of April, we have the heat pump common mistakes. On the 24th of April, we're going through the multi-unit developments. Shane mentioned them there. We're hoping that by the 24th of April, we'll have clarity on some of the above the shop grants. It's supposed to be announced the end of Q1 is what we're told. So imminent any day now, hopefully. But we'll be including some of the above the shop information if we have it in that MUDS. On the 1st of May, we're doing a webinar specifically on windows and doors. Again, hopefully a lot of the grey area will be ironed out by then, and we'll have definitive answers on the various criteria.
We thought that as well a month ago, John, but it's actually worse it has gotten. But anyway, we live in hope.
Or it's a bit of a sore subject. I've been cranky about it for the last 3 days, and Shane insists on bringing it up every time he sees me as well, just to rub it in. So yeah, look, there's a lot of changes happening in it. So on the 15th of May, we'll be going through the business energy upgrade grants. So we'll be going through the specifics of the CEG as well, which you've kind of got a high level of here, the business side of the CEG. But we will be also going through some of those other grants that we mentioned, the BUs, the SSRH, all those other grants that are available for businesses.
Well, John, actually, when it says business there, we actually that's actually should be probably non-domestic, right? Because it includes some of the community stuff, which would be the community centre or the GAA club. So the name there probably misleading. So it's non-domestic, but without going to the big stuff, it's community centres, GAA clubs or golf clubs or whatever it is, and commercial. We don't really go up into the industrial. Sorry, we will, I suppose, in some of the detail, but probably not much.
On the 22nd of May, we have a webinar on the high temperature heat pump, the pilot scheme that's been brought out. That's for the R290 heat pumps. SEAI will be joining us for that. Stephen Farrell, I think, is going to join us. And on the 29th of May, then we have commercial PV. So we're looking at the large scale PV, the design of how those systems are designed, analysing of bills, making sure that the system is sized correctly. We'll be looking at incoming electricity size for your incoming mains and what you can get, what you're likely to get approval for from ESB networks for connecting to their grid. So that's it. This is the January, February, and March one, which is out of date as of now. And now that we finish this one, so the new one is going up today, with the April, May, and June webinars on it. So that'll be on our website by the end of today. So
again, Johnny, could I add to that if there are any of the professionals here, and I know looking at the list, there's probably half the people on here are professionals. If they wanted us to come and do something specifically for them, if they had projects, and these webinars I'm hearing are useful for people, but if they wanted it to be more bespoke for their projects, we're happy to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Super.
Excellent. Thanks, Shane. Thanks, Davey. Thanks, Connor, for all your help. And thanks very much for joining us and listening to us for an hour. And have a good weekend, and hopefully the sun shines. Thanks, guys.
Bye, Johnny. Thank you, guys.
Cheers, Shane.